I'm Robert with Knowmium, and this video takes a look at how professors and teachers can use storytelling in teaching. But if you're not a professor or a teacher, don't leave quite yet, because the ideas in this video expand into how we can use storytelling when we're presenting, whether that's in front of a large audience or in front of a small group, or how we can use storytelling when we're persuading others, whether it's a one-on-one conversation or in a small group. This video covers content originally given to a group of university professors, but no matter what business you're in, there is a place for you to use stories. In a live session, I asked people, when was the last story you told? What was it? Some people have an answer, but a lot of people say, I don't remember. I don't remember intentionally telling a story anytime recently. And I asked them, what did you talk about during lunch today with your colleagues? Or last weekend when you had a family dinner, what conversations did you have? And pretty soon they start saying, well, I talked about something that happened to me on the way to work. Or last year I went to Bali and I told a story about, they did tell a story recently, and we all do. We are everyday storytellers. When we're talking about our lives and things that happen to us, they may not be structured stories with a beginning, middle, and an end, but they are partial stories and they are experiences that we can turn into stories. We often tell stories that we've heard about from a friend, we read them in the news, or we saw a story on TV or in a movie. We're going to cover 5 things in this video. First, we're going to focus on the power of stories and why anybody in any profession should be using storytelling if they want to be effective communicators. Then we'll take a look at the basic components of stories and how you can start building a story that you can use in your profession right now. We'll take a look at where to find stories and also what to avoid when we're using storytelling, and we'll end with a couple of tips on how to improve and become a better storyteller. There is a lot of research on the effectiveness of storytelling. One of my favorite books is called Resonate by Nancy Duarte. Not only does Nancy cover the elements of stories and the structures of stories, but how we can use visuals like slides to tell that story as well as a speaker. For professors, I'm going to tell you a story from a book from a professor, Chip Heath, one of the co-authors of Made to Stick. Now, Chip Heath was a professor at Stanford University in the Graduate School of Business. So he had some really high-level business students. And semester after semester, he ran an experiment. He comes into class and he says, surprise everybody, you're going to give a 1-minute speech today. Now, half of the class, I'm going to give you a topic. Your topic is why nonviolent crime is serious. Things like illegal parking, that's serious business. The other half of the room, your speech is going to be on why nonviolent crime is not serious. Now, these are business students. They have a little bit of time to prepare, and no matter which topic they got, they can successfully give a 1-minute speech. Chip Heath recorded semester after semester what he saw happen. 90% of the students use statistics to get their message across. Now, these are business students. Business students love statistics, and a minute's not a lot of time, so packing in a lot of statistics seems like a great way to prove your ideas, right? The students were using an average of 2 to 3 statistics for every minute-long speech. What about storytelling? Only about 10% of the students use stories to get their message across. Now, a minute's not a lot of time, but you could pack in a short story within a minute. And then, what Chip Heath does is he puts comedy on the television. He plays Monty Python for 10 minutes and says, relax, good work, I'll be back in 10 minutes. 10 minutes goes by, and Chip Heath does something else kind of mean. He comes in and he says, students, take out a piece of paper and write down everything that you can remember about the speeches today. Now, the students didn't know there was a quiz on these speeches. Chip Heath just wanted to find out what would they naturally remember. Here's what he found. Only about 5% of the students can remember any statistics. Because so many students use statistics in their speeches, most students can't remember even one or two ideas from content they heard 10 minutes ago. It's gone. Humans don't remember statistics on their own. They don't remember dry facts by themselves. Now, 63% of the students can remember stories that were used in those speeches. 63 is not perfect, it's not 100, but it's a lot better than 5%. And if you would like 5% of your audience to remember your ideas or 63% of your audience to remember your ideas, the answer is very clear. There's something else that Chip Heath found, is that when second language speakers used stories, they were just as memorable. So if a student was in the United States, but English was their second language, it didn't matter if their vocabulary was perfect or their grammar was perfect or if they had the same presentation style that a native speaker might have if giving an English presentation. Stories leveled that playing field and made them just as memorable. So, stories, they're memorable. We will remember stories and the point or lesson of a story much more than we will a list of data. Stories are also very emotional and they can make people care. When I told the story about Chip Heath's class, most of us have been a student and we had a surprise assignment. Most of us, whether we were a student or a business person, have been asked to give a presentation. And what if we're asked to give a presentation that we hadn't prepared for? Most of us know how that feels. Some of us have been teachers or professors. We know what it's like organizing a class. So there's something that all of us can relate to, even if we've never been to Stanford University. Ultimately, this makes stories persuasive. And if you want to change people's minds and get them to do something, using storytelling somewhere in your lessons or in your presentations or in your conversations is an excellent idea. Now, think about this. If you have a colleague, whether they're a professor or a business person, if they come to you and they say, hey, I need your help with a project, let me give you all this information. It's like a huge stack of books. It's a lot to receive all at once. When we see a huge stack of paperwork, we go, no, not interested, don't have time, I've got my own work to take care of. But if somebody comes to us and they say, I'd like to share with you a vision, I'd like to share with you a big picture of a project that I'm working on, we're not trying to force the stack of books and paperwork on them. We're not trying to give them all the details, all the research, all the data. That can come later. We just need to open them up to the direction that we're going and the overall project that we're working on. And once we can get them to say, okay, tell me more, there is definitely a time for the data and the statistics. Now, whenever we're delivering information, whether it's in a class lecture or whether it's in a business presentation, we can tell a story that has data and statistics within it. We can tell a story about what a business person like Bill Gates did, and we can throw in statistics along the way. And again, we may not remember all those numbers later, but we will remember why those numbers were important, because they were inside a narrative, a story. Now, most of us are subject matter experts. Whether you're a student and you've been studying something, or whether you've just had a hobby your entire life, or whether you're a professor or a business person, we've probably chosen certain things to focus on. Now, when we are a subject matter expert, let's say we're a nuclear scientist, and we talk to another nuclear scientist, all that research, all those facts, all those statistics make sense because the other subject matter expert, the other nuclear scientist, has read through similar data and they already have a framework of how to use that information. But what happens when the nuclear scientist goes to someone in marketing? Now, someone in marketing is a subject matter expert in marketing, in branding, but they're not a nuclear scientist. So a lot of those statistics and a lot of that research not only is going to be irrelevant to the marketer, but they don't have the background as a nuclear scientist to actually use all that data. So, subject matter experts, your goal is not to make the audience or your students know how smart you are within a 1-hour lecture or a 1-hour class. It's too much. Storytelling can ease people into that deeper information. So what I'd like you to do right now, and if you need to pause, that's fine, think about a story from your field. Now, I'm going to tell a story from my field, and you can follow along these 5 different steps of what makes a good story. Now, this is not the only structure to use, but this is a very basic one that we can use for a lot of the stories that we might tell in a classroom or to business colleagues. I am a communication consultant. I often travel, so I will tell you a story that happened to me. Component number 1 is the setting. Who was it? It was me, and it was also a business client of mine. Where was I? I was in Tokyo, Japan. And when did this happen? It happened about 5 years ago. I went to my client's business meeting room, and I had a conversation with them. I had plugged in my computer, and when I went to unplug the computer, one of the administrators decided to help me. And in Japan, you have to turn the AC plug a little bit to remove it, and this administrator didn't do that. Surprise, the AC plug absolutely broke, and I had no way to power my computer anymore. This is the second component. Something surprising happened. So, I was in a panic. I thought, what am I going to do for the rest of the day? I have to use my computer, and yes, I have some battery, but I don't think it's going to last. I have a lot of work I have to do, and this can't wait. So, during lunch, I went outside to find a replacement adapter. This is when things started to escalate. I went to a 7-Eleven, and they had some adapters, but they were all for Japanese products, and I didn't have a Japanese computer. I needed something that was global. I needed an adapter that would work in Japan, but from another country, and they were selling adapters for Japanese products to be taken to other countries. So it wasn't working. And I said, what do I do? What do I do? So I went from store to store to store. I started looking at Google Maps. Is there an Apple store? Is there an electronics store? There wasn't anything near, and I wasn't quite sure what I was going to do until I went into a hotel lobby. And this really starts the end of my story. I went up to the front desk and I said, do you sell travel adapters for computers? And they said, well, we have a bunch that people leave. Do you want one? And I thought, oh, you're just going to give me a travel adapter? You have what I need and it's free? And they said, yeah, we get these all the time. And that was great customer service, even though I wasn't a guest at that hotel. And that's the end of the story as it happened to me, but there's one more thing left to tell. That's the lesson. What do I need my audience to know about the moral of that story? And I have a couple of them. First, bring backup AC plugs or power adapters if you're going to travel and give business presentations. And second of all, be resourceful and network. Just because you don't find what you need right away doesn't mean that resource doesn't exist. You might find it in a place you didn't think about, like a hotel front desk. Now, as I told that story, think to yourself, when have you been a traveler? When have you had technology problems? When have you gone from store to store to store trying to find something that you couldn't get? And when have you met somebody and they had what you needed and all you had to do was ask for it? It didn't even cost any money. Most of us have been in those situations. You don't have to be in my line of work, and you don't have to have ever traveled to Tokyo. That's why stories can connect, because they're emotional and we share some of these experiences as humans. So, where to find stories? Well, let's say you're a professor and you're in engineering, or let's say you're a business person and you're in marketing. Stories exist. First of all, your life. You have lived, you've studied, and just because a story doesn't have a lot of action doesn't mean it's not a great story. A story could simply be a conversation that happened to you. You could have been a student at university and something happened in the class with the professor, and the story really was the conversation and where the conversation went, as long as it had some of those elements of surprise and resolution and an ending in there. Your network, the friends, the family, the other professionals that you know talk about their lives. Once we tell a story, it often becomes the world story. Now, of course, we can cite our sources. If somebody told us a story, we should attribute that good story to who told it. But the stories that we hear throughout our lives can be retold, and we don't have to have all the details. As long as we have the basic components, it can be a great story. Those of us who are professionals, again, professors, business people, students, we read media, we read the news, we read history, we read blogs and magazine articles, we watch documentaries. Whatever's related to your field, there's stories out there. The dry news article about what's happening in a certain government around the world today has most of those components of a good story. They have a setting, they have something surprising, they have how does it escalate, they have an ending, and they hopefully have a moral, a lesson. And if not, the moral or lesson is for you to determine and to share with your network and your audience. And sometimes we have to be creative. We have to create a story. Now, one of the things I'm going to mention to avoid is don't lie. I mean, you should avoid lying, but we don't want to lose the trust of our audience, whether it's on the spot or a year later they realize, hey, that wasn't true. But when we create a story, it's not a lie. A story is a parable. It's a narrative. It's something that's entertaining and that proves a point. So for example, The Lion King didn't really happen, but I might tell a story from The Lion King of how Simba returned to his homeland to become king. And even though it's not a real story, it's not meant to be. It's not meant to deceive. It's meant to prove a point and to entertain a little bit. So, continue on what not to do. Don't rely only on emotion. And this is something we hear from a lot of business people around the world. Stories can be emotional. They can connect with emotion, but what if we rely too much on emotion? Well, then it's just a fantasy. If you don't have research, data, facts, and statistics to back up your business idea, it's going to fall flat. We can't connect with people's emotion and then have nothing else to deliver. But go back to what Aristotle said. We need emotion, we need credibility, but we also need logic if we're going to persuade other people. Use all of them. Just know that statistics alone, they're not really emotional. And that's the danger with statistics and dry facts by themselves. I already covered this one. Don't lie. Don't use stories to manipulate or deceive, even though it's possible to do that. It's possible to get people to focus on a story or to react emotionally to something to distract them from the real business issue at hand, or to distract them from our real motives. So again, professors, business people, you should know this, but we do hear this, aren't stories used to manipulate? Well, so are statistics. It depends how you use them. Something else to avoid, don't create discomfort, especially in a business or a professional setting. There may be stories that happen to us personally that aren't really appropriate to share in all environments, and at other times there are no restrictions on the stories we tell. There are wonderful events and podcasts where people are sharing intimate stories about their lives. They might even be controversial, and that may be great for that podcast, but is it going to be great in front of a group of students? Just be aware of that. And don't send mixed messages. Sometimes we tell a story that might have a lot of different interpretations. We might have a lesson that we give, but the audience might get a different lesson out of that. Some people might feel that my story from Tokyo and having that power adapter break, that could be seen as me being careless, being unprepared. I let an administrator touch my technological equipment. I should have never given that control away to somebody. Sure, but that's why we finish with a lesson, a moral of the story, so the audience is very clear what we want to convey when that story is finished. Don't go over time. Storytelling can be short. We can tell a quick example story in 30 seconds or less, but storytelling has the ability to go on and on and on. And if you've ever been to a party with the alcohol flowing and you know those extroverts who like to talk, I'm one of them, we can continue going on and on and on. So if we're in a business presentation or if we're in a classroom, we may need to time out and do a little bit of practice to make sure our story is not going over our allotted time or over the audience's attention span. Finally, how can we improve? Well, just like any skill in the world, practice. If you want to be a better pizza chef, make pizzas. Try them. Try different things until you find the right pizza recipe. If you want to be a great public speaker, you're going to have to get up, you're going to have to give speeches, you're going to have to get feedback, you're going to have to review yourself and watch videos of yourself if you really want to take it to the next level. But here's the great thing about storytelling. Yes, you can practice in front of an audience. Yes, you can take video, but you can practice just by doing it. The next time you're in a Zoom call or at a physical lunch, make a point to tell a story. See how people react. If you have a trusted network of people, if you have your colleagues, family, or friend, tell them, I'd like to share a story with you, and I'd love to get your feedback. What did you like? What do you think I could add to it? And once you have a story that works for your audience, whether it's in a classroom or in a business environment or at a social party, catalog it. Get a story file. Get out a Microsoft Word document and type up either the entire story or, even better, just the talking points, just the components. Because that's the beauty of storytelling. It's not just the audience that remembers it, it's you, the storyteller. And if you've told that story, you will remember those components. And it will make it easier for you when you are delivering content on the spot. So, go out, have fun, practice storytelling in social environments, be the life of the conversation, be the life of a party. Because whether you're in business, whether you're in teaching, or whether you're just entertaining, storytelling absolutely works.